guardian angel was watching. That's what the priest who was behind the wheel of this white car is saying about the heart-stopping moment an SUV flew right over him.
Oh my God!
The ancient accounts describe beings of light moving through the world on assignments humans cannot see. Most people file that away as mythology, but cameras do not. Around the world, ordinary people have recorded glowing figures, humanoid forms appearing without warning, and encounters that no available explanation has successfully closed. The question this footage keeps forcing open is not whether angels existed, it is whether they ever stopped existing. Number 15. Protective wings. Consider the mysterious case of Father John Bach. His experience has divided audiences across the world into two distinct camps ever since the footage surfaced. Many feel certain that a divine protector intervened. Skeptics argue that chance, and nothing else, explains what unfolded. But regardless of where a person stands on that question, the specific details of what happened that afternoon are difficult to file away neatly under either explanation. On October 2, 2022, 87-year-old Franciscan priest Father John Bach was driving to celebrate Sunday Mass in Milford, Ohio. Coincidentally, that exact day was the Catholic feast of the guardian angels. The situation turned lethal in a matter of seconds. A teenager behind the wheel of a nearby car suffered an unexpected seizure and lost all control of the vehicle. The car accelerated rapidly and moved in a direct line toward the priest, with nothing between the speeding vehicle and Father Bach to slow it down. Then something happened that no one present could account for. A figure in white robes, with what witnesses described as glowing wings, appeared to materialize in the street between the car and the priest. The presence made contact with the vehicle. The car flipped through the air and landed upright on the ground without crashing into anything. When medical staff examined the young driver afterward, they found him completely unharmed. No cuts, no broken bones, no concussion. A car that flipped off the ground and a driver without a scratch. Father Bach later made a public statement. He said he believed God's hand had been present in what happened. He did not claim to have seen the figure clearly. He claimed only that something had intervened and that the outcome should not have been possible without intervention. The footage of the event still exists and continues to circulate. The question that footage keeps raising is not whether something happened because something clearly happened. The question is what category of thing it belongs to. What makes this case a starting point for a conversation about angels is not just the spectacle of it. It is that the mechanism, a figure appearing between a human being and imminent death, absorbing the impact and vanishing, maps almost exactly onto the oldest recorded descriptions of guardian angel behavior found across religious traditions dating back more than 3,000 years. The Hebrew Bible describes angels as malachim, meaning messengers or agents sent to act on behalf of the divine. The New Testament carries accounts of angels intervening in moments of mortal danger. The Quran describes the malaika as beings who accompany and protect. What Father Bach described is not new. The fact that it was caught on camera is. Number 14. The Angel and the Shopping Mall in Indonesia. On the other side of the world, in the middle of a quiet night, a security camera mounted in the courtyard of a shopping mall in Indonesia recorded something that the footage alone has never fully explained. A white creature with wings appeared in front of the mall, hovered briefly above the ground, and then shot upward into the sky with a speed that the camera barely tracked. The movement from appearance to disappearance lasted only a few seconds. What the camera captured afterward was more revealing than the figure itself. A group of children who were nearby did not run away. They ran toward the spot where the figure had been. They gathered at the exact location where it had hovered, looking up, pointing, animated with something that looked less like fear and more like excitement. That behavioral detail is one that researchers who study witness psychology find genuinely significant. Fear responses and wonder responses are neurologically distinct and produce different physical behaviors. Fear generates avoidance. It makes people move away from a stimulus. Wonder generates approach. It pulls people toward the source of the experience. These children displayed an unambiguous approach response. Nobody told them to move toward that spot. They went there because something in what they had just witnessed drew them in rather than driving them back. Researchers in the field of anomalous experience have noted that this approach behavior in child witnesses carries particular weight, partly because children have not yet developed the social instinct to perform the reaction they think others expect of them, and partly because a child's threat detection system is generally more sensitive than an adult's. If what those children saw had registered as threatening, they would have moved in the opposite direction, but they did not. Many analysts who have examined this footage consider it among the most credible recordings in this category. Not because the image itself is especially clear, but because of the behavioral evidence surrounding it. The figure in the frame is only part of the story. The children running toward where it stood are the other part. Number 13. A guardian angel in China. This is the footage that stopped the internet when it first circulated, and the reason it stopped the internet is simple. It should not have happened. Surveillance footage from a road intersection in China shows a tricycle rider crossing at a moment when a massive truck comes through at full speed. The physics of what follows are straightforward. At that speed, at that angle, with that mass differential between the truck and the tricycle, there is no survival outcome. The collision is fatal. There is no version of that moment where the tricycle rider walks away. And then a figure appears. In a fraction of a second, the rider is no longer in the path of the truck. The figure that removed them from the point of impact does not run. It does not lunge or dive or sprint. After the intervention, it walks away slowly, at a casual, unhurried pace, as though the moment that just occurred was entirely ordinary. The truck driver stopped his vehicle. He stepped out and walked to the spot where the impact should have happened. The footage shows him standing there looking around, unable to reconcile what his own eyes were processing. There was nobody there. There was no wreckage of the tricycle. The detail that most people overlook when they first watch this footage is the walking pace of the figure after the rescue. If this were a human being who had just performed a physical intervention at that speed, the body's adrenaline response would have produced a completely different movement pattern. Elevated heart rate, rapid breathing, muscle activation. All of these would have expressed themselves physically in the seconds following the act. What the footage shows instead is a figure moving with the kind of unhurried calm that does not belong to a human nervous system that has just done something at the edge of what the human body can do. The casualness of the exit is, in many ways, the most unexplainable element of the entire recording. Number 12. The Michigan Angel. Pastor Glenn Thorman of East Jordan, Michigan occupies a particular position in the landscape of angel witness accounts because of what he does for a living beyond his role in the church. Thorman is also the town's fire chief. That second role matters considerably when evaluating what he reported. Fire chiefs are trained observers in one of the most demanding environments that observation can occur in. They are professionally required to assess chaotic situations with accuracy, to distinguish between what is real and what is a trick of heat, smoke, or stress, because the decisions they make based on those assessments determine whether people live or die. A fire chief's credibility as a witness is not the same as that of an anonymous upload. It carries a different kind of professional weight. Thorman photographed what appeared to be an angelic figure hovering in the dark outside, near a car, on a cold midnight in Michigan. The figure had transparent wings and was standing rather than flying, present and still, like something positioned to watch rather than to act. He took 2 photographs. The first shows the figure in a stationary position. The second shows it in a slightly different position, consistent with movement between the 2 frames. The shift between the 2 images tracks the way a living entity moves, not the way a smear or a lens artifact behaves across two separate exposures. The most frequently offered skeptical explanation for this image is that the figure is a moth caught in the infrared illumination of the camera. Infrared sensors, when a moth or large insect flies close to the lens, can produce a large, glowing, semi-transparent shape that under certain conditions resembles a humanoid form. It is a real phenomenon, well documented in paranormal photography research, and it is the first explanation that experienced image analysts reach for when they encounter this type of footage. Thorman's response to that explanation is direct. The temperature in East Jordan at midnight that night made insect flight essentially impossible. Insects are cold-blooded. In the temperatures that Michigan reaches on a cold December night, moths are not flying. He was not looking at an insect. What people find most compelling about this case is not the image itself. It is Thorman's relationship to the image. He was already a pastor. His faith did not require photographic evidence. The photographs did not give him something he lacked. He shared them not to persuade anyone or to make a claim about his own spiritual standing, but because he felt he had witnessed something real and believed others deserved to know about it. In anomalous experience research, the absence of personal agenda in a witness, the presence of someone who has nothing to gain and nothing to prove, is consistently identified as one of the strongest indicators of an honest account. Thorman fits that profile precisely. Number 11. Security camera captures an angel over a congregation. At Vineyard Anaheim Church in Anaheim, California, toward the end of 2019, something passed through a security camera feed during a live worship service that the church's own security director spent considerable time attempting to explain away before concluding that he could not. Bill Herman, the man watching that feed, spent 37 years in law enforcement before taking the role of security director at the church. He is, by his own description, a grounded realist. When the image swept across his screen, his first instinct was not wonder, it was procedure. He rewound the footage and watched it multiple times. He cross-referenced the other camera feeds covering the church's glass doors to determine whether a passing car's headlights could have produced a reflection at that angle. No car passed. He worked through every rational explanation he could construct, presented the footage to others around him, and asked them to do the same. After exhausting that process, the consensus among everyone who reviewed the footage was that what the camera had captured was not a reflection, not a lens artifact, and not a trick of the lighting rig above the stage. What the camera shows briefly and at speed is an image sweeping across the feed above the congregation. The resolution makes fine detail difficult, but the outline suggests a small figure with wings. The movement is not the drift of a reflection. It is directional, fast, and deliberate. What gives this account particular texture is the setting in which it occurred. The congregation at that moment had their arms raised. The band was on the stage. The room was at the height of corporate worship, the specific kind of charged, focused, emotionally intense environment that multiple religious traditions describe as the conditions under which the boundary between the physical and the spiritual becomes most permeable. Herman did not go looking for an angel. The camera found one. Number 10. The alleged angel outside Skoan, Lagos. Outside the gates of the synagogue, Church of All Nations in Lagos, Nigeria, the church built by the late T.B. Joshua, one of the most watched and most contested figures in African Pentecostalism, a video surfaced that ignited debate across social media with unusual intensity, partly because of who was watching. The footage, recorded from inside a stationary vehicle parked outside the church entrance, shows an anonymous individual filming the gate. Then, without warning, a flashy figure in white crosses the road at a speed and in a manner that the person filming immediately registers as unusual. The figure moves through the church gate and disappears inside the compound. The man filming can be heard telling his companion in real time that he has just witnessed something strange. The footage was uploaded to Emmanuel TV's YouTube channel, and the response was immediate and large. A commenter who identified himself as a professional graphics editor wrote that he had watched the clip 20 times and found no evidence of reflection, compositing, or editing, citing specifically the height of the figure and the speed of its movement as details inconsistent with any optical artifact he recognized. Others described the figure as a transparent, human-shaped moving object, not a shadow, not a reflection, but a form with apparent depth and deliberate motion. Not everyone agreed. Some viewers argued that the figure was not angelic in appearance, and others raised the possibility of CGI or glass reflection from the vehicle window. In the context of Scone specifically, the debate carried additional layers, given the Church's history of documented healings and equally documented controversies. To the congregation's faithful, the footage was confirmation of something they already believed about the space. To critics, it was another entry in a long record of unverifiable claims. What is undeniable is the speed of the figure's movement and the absence of a natural explanation that satisfies the footage's most careful observers. The church gate in that video is not a place where random pedestrians move like that. Number 9. The angels over the great mosque of Mecca. The Kaaba, the ancient cube-shaped structure at the center of Masjid al-Haram in Mecca, is the most sacred site in Islam. It is the point toward which more than 2 billion Muslims orient themselves in prayer 5 times a day. Every year, millions of pilgrims make the Hajj, the obligatory journey to stand before it, circling it in the Tawaf, a counterclockwise circumambulation described in the Quran as mirroring the movement of angels around the throne of God. The space is charged with centuries of collective belief, prayer, and devotion in a way that has no parallel on the planet. In footage captured in the courtyard of that mosque, figures described as radiant and luminous have been seen hovering above the top of the Kaaba. The response from devout Muslims who have seen this footage has been described consistently as overwhelming. Not fear, not confusion, but joy, and a sense of confirmation so deep that some viewers reportedly wept. From a technical standpoint, the stadium-grade lighting installed in the mosque's courtyard for the management of millions of nighttime pilgrims is among the most powerful artificial lighting infrastructure in the world. That level of illumination can produce optical phenomena that move, hover, and interact with camera sensors in ways that are not immediately intuitive. That is a legitimate and serious explanation that deserves to be on the table. But consider the source of the testimony pushing back against it. The people who were present in that courtyard on those nights are not casual tourists encountering the lighting for the first time. Many are pilgrims who have made this journey multiple times, people who have stood in that space across different years and different hours, who know precisely what the lighting looks like when it catches the marble floor, the air above the Kaaba, the surrounding minarets. When those specific people, with that specific depth of familiarity with the environment, decline the technical explanation, that is not ignorance. That is informed witness testimony, and it points in a different direction. Number 8. The Angel of the Mosque in Azerbaijan. A video from a mosque in Azerbaijan shows something that stands apart from nearly every other entry in this conversation, not because of the quality of the footage. It is low resolution, shot on a mobile phone, blurry at the edges, but because of what the figure in it appears to be doing. It is not hovering above a disaster. It is not intercepting a vehicle. It is not appearing dramatically in a moment of crisis. The luminous figure visible inside the mosque is in prayer. Positioned in the same orientation as the human worshippers who fill that space daily, engaged in the same act of devotion, this entity, if that is what it is, appears to be there not for the people around it, but for its own relationship with the divine. When this footage reached the regular congregation of that mosque, people who attend that space with sufficient frequency to know every corner of it, every angle of natural and artificial light at every hour, their response was unanimous. They did not call it a ghost. They did not call it a trick of light. They called it an angel at prayer. That specificity matters. The Islamic tradition contains detailed accounts of the Malaika as beings of worship, not merely of service. The Quran describes the angels as constantly engaged in the praise and glorification of God, independent of any task they may be assigned in relation to human beings. The angel that never stops praying is not a Christian concept imported into an Islamic frame. It is native to Islamic theology and has been for 14 centuries. The congregation who named what they saw in that footage knew their tradition. They were not reaching for a label. They were recognizing something they already had a name for. What this footage introduces into the broader conversation is a shift in framework. Every other case in this list involves an angel oriented toward a human need, protecting, saving, watching, comforting. This one shows an angel oriented toward something else entirely. If that is what the footage captures, it suggests that whatever these beings are, their existence is not defined by their relationship to us. We are part of the story. We are not the whole story. Number 7. The Post-Tsunami Angel. A helicopter filming the aftermath of a tsunami captured footage that has since become one of the most discussed pieces of post-disaster visual evidence in this category. The landscape below was devastation, leveled structures, displaced earth, the particular silence of a place where ordinary life has been erased completely. And hovering in the air above the wreckage, visible and stationary in the footage, was a bright white beam of light. It was not drifting with wind currents. It was not attached to any structure below it. It was not moving across the frame the way a reflection from the helicopter's own lighting would move. It simply existed in the air above the destruction, fixed and present. The tsunami in question ranks among the deadliest natural disasters in recorded history. The scale of death and displacement was such that conventional frameworks for making sense of suffering were not adequate to the situation. People in the affected areas and watching from around the world needed something. Any piece of evidence that suggested the catastrophe was not the end of the story. The footage gave them that. Whether the light was an angel, an optical artifact of the helicopter's camera system in unusual atmospheric conditions, or something else entirely, the psychological function it served was real and measurable. Studies of disaster communities consistently show that perceived spiritual presence in the immediate aftermath of catastrophic loss is one of the most significant factors in early psychological stabilization. The light above the ruins did what no rescue helicopter could do by itself. It told people who had lost everything that something was still present, that something was watching, that the destruction was not the whole story. Whether or not that light was what people believed it to be, what it did for the people who needed it is not in question. Number 6. The Graveyard Ascending Figure. A group that includes a couple and a cameraman is in a graveyard at night. The emotional atmosphere of the setting is already weighted before anything unusual occurs. Graveyards carry a specific psychological charge across virtually every culture on the planet, rooted in the near-universal intuition that these are threshold spaces, places where the distance between the physical world and whatever exists beyond it is narrower than it is elsewhere. The cameraman becomes visibly unsettled. The camera begins to move erratically, losing the stillness of a person in control of their equipment. And then the camera captures a figure in the sky above the graveyard, ascending, rising steadily upward, moving toward the clouds with a quality of deliberate, unhurried vertical movement. The most immediate skeptical explanation is that the footage shows a plane taking off in the distance. Planes rise into the sky. They appear above horizon lines. This is a fair first response. But the trajectory of the figure in the footage does not follow the flight path of a commercial aircraft on takeoff. Commercial aircraft do not ascend at that angle, at that speed, or with that movement quality. The figure moves vertically in a way that no conventional aircraft type produces in its departure profile. It rises not like a machine climbing through air, but like something lifting under its own intention. The specific setting amplifies everything about this footage. Across religious traditions as different as Christianity, Islam, Judaism, Hinduism, and numerous indigenous spiritual systems, burial grounds are described as places of elevated spiritual activity. Not because of superstition, but because they are spaces humans have designated across all of recorded history for the transition between one state of existence and another. The presence of an ascending figure in that specific location, captured by a camera that was already behaving unlike a camera in a stable operator's hands, is a convergence that resists easy reduction to coincidence. Number 5. The mysterious security camera. There is footage, widely circulated in paranormal research communities, of a glowing humanoid figure moving through an empty interior space caught on a low-resolution security camera. The image is not sharp. The outlines of the figure are soft and slightly distorted by the camera's limitations. But the movement is what sets this recording apart from the majority of claims in this space. Lens flares do not navigate around furniture. Light reflections do not change direction in response to the geometry of a room. What the figure in this footage does is move through the space as though it is aware of the space, adjusting its path, altering its direction, moving with what multiple analysts have described as grace rather than drift. It behaves the way a living entity with spatial awareness behaves, not the way an optical artifact behaves. Researchers who specialize in anomalous footage have noted that this clip does not match the standard profile of a ghost sighting either. Ghost footage, when it depicts a humanoid presence, typically shows that presence behaving in ways that mirror human behavior. Walking through a hallway, occupying a doorway, sitting in a chair. The figure in this recording does none of those things. It is not mimicking any posture or movement pattern associated with human occupation of a space. Its behavior has been described in the literature on this subject as a ballet of light. It is doing something entirely its own. Some researchers have placed this footage within the category of what multiple religious traditions call watcher angels, a class of celestial beings whose function is not intervention or protection or communication, but observation. The Watchers, described in texts ranging from the Book of Enoch to the Dead Sea Scrolls to early Islamic Hadith literature, are beings whose primary activity is to witness, not to save, not to deliver messages, to watch. If that framework is the right one for this footage, the question it raises is not whether we are being protected, it is whether we are being observed. And that is a profoundly different kind of question to sit with. Number 4. The reading angels. Hospital settings generate angel accounts at a rate that is disproportionate to any other environment in the documented record. This may not be difficult to understand when you consider what hospitals concentrate in a single space: extreme physical vulnerability, focused prayer, the full spectrum of human fear, and the sustained hope of people who have run out of ordinary options. In 1994, a woman identified in the account as D. Baylor Baby was admitted to hospital with acute pain from a fibroid tumor the size of a grapefruit. The surgery was successful, but more complicated than anticipated. In recovery, she suffered an allergic reaction to the morphine administered for pain management, requiring additional medication to counteract the reaction, compounding an already severe experience. After eventually being given medication that allowed her to sleep, she woke at 2 in the morning to the sound of someone speaking. A young woman was sitting at her bedside. Short brown hair, a white hospital staff uniform, reading aloud from the Bible. When the patient asked why she was there and whether everything was all right, the young woman stopped reading but did not look up. She said only that she had been sent to make sure the patient would be all right, that the patient was going to be fine, that she should rest. Then she resumed reading and the patient drifted back to sleep. Number 3. The eerie aerial anomaly over Brazil. A piece of footage that first appeared on a paranormal-themed social media page before spreading to YouTube shows a white aerial form moving through dark clouds over what is reportedly a location in Brazil. The footage's origins are not fully documented. No precise location, no named witness, no verified timestamp. And those gaps matter when evaluating it. What the footage does show is unusual enough to have generated debate beyond the typical circle of paranormal enthusiasts. The white form moves through the cloud layer in a way that changes shape multiple times across the duration of the clip. At certain moments, the outline suggests an angel with arms extended. At other moments, the form elongates into something resembling a large winged creature in flight. The shape-shifting quality is what separates this from a simple cloud formation, which generally maintains a consistent outline relative to its movement direction. Explanations proposed for the footage cover significant range. Some observers have argued for an angelic or extraterrestrial origin. A more grounded hypothesis, offered by several weather-literate commenters, is that the formation is a plasma phenomenon, something analogous to ball lightning, generated by the electrical activity of the storm surrounding it. Plasma formations can take elongated, irregular shapes, can move against wind currents, and can change form as the electrical charge that sustains them fluctuates. This is a scientifically coherent explanation that does not require anything supernatural to function. The absence of witness testimony is the most significant limitation of this case. Without someone who was physically present, someone who can speak to what the formation looked like to the naked eye, how it moved in real time, how long it persisted, the footage exists without the human anchor that gives anomalous sightings their most persuasive dimension. The image is striking. The story behind the image is incomplete. Number 2. Australia's Sky Angel. During a flight departing from Australia, a passenger pointed a phone camera at the sky through the cabin window. What emerged from behind the cloud line was a silhouette, wings spread wide, arms open, a figure whose proportions and posture looked unmistakably like a classical depiction of an angel resting on the cloud surface. The cameraman has maintained consistently across every account he has given that the footage was not digitally altered. No filters, no post-processing, no editing of any kind. A phone pointed at a window at cruising altitude. The scientific explanation most commonly applied to this category of sighting is pareidolia, the well-documented neurological tendency of the human brain to perceive familiar shapes, particularly faces and figures, in random or ambiguous visual data. This is a real and well-studied phenomenon. The same cognitive architecture that allows humans to recognize faces in fractions of a second also generates false positives in clouds, rock formations, wood grain, and shadows. The brain's pattern recognition systems are tuned for speed rather than accuracy, and they produce meaningful shapes from meaningless data with remarkable regularity. The counter-argument that believers in this footage raise is a question of specificity and proportion. Pareidolia typically produces vague, suggestive outlines, a shape that sort of resembles a face, a formation that could be interpreted as a figure if you tilt your head. What the Australia footage shows is specific. The wings are symmetrical. The figure's posture is deliberate. The proportions between the body and the wings follow the internal logic of a single, coherent form rather than the random assembly of unrelated cloud masses. The question this footage ultimately raises is where the boundary of pareidolia ends. At what level of specificity and proportion does the brain's pattern recognition system stop being a sufficient explanation? No one has a clean threshold for that. The absence of that threshold is precisely why this footage has never been fully resolved in either direction. Number 1. The Angel in the Carolina Sky. In the skies above Camden, South Carolina, a witness looked up and found a cloud formation that did not behave the way clouds are supposed to behave. The sky around it was wide open and largely clear. The formation hung alone, without the cluster of atmospheric moisture that typically generates cloud shapes of any significant size. It was shaped, with a specificity that the witness found impossible to dismiss as casual pattern recognition, like an angel. Wings extended, the form reaching across the blue in what the witness described as the posture of a quiet guardian. The most immediate conventional explanation is an aircraft contrail. The water vapor condensation left behind by high-altitude flights, which can spread and distort into irregular shapes depending on wind shear and atmospheric humidity. But the witness at the scene noted that the conditions that day did not support that explanation easily. The air was clear. There was no evidence of recent aircraft activity directly above the formation. The shape maintained its integrity for longer than contrails typically do before dispersing. What makes cloud formations like this one worth including in a serious conversation about the subject is not the claim that clouds are angels. It is the claim that the visual data occasionally produces something that resists the easiest available explanation, and that sits stubbornly at the edge of what the witness can account for. This witness was not looking for anything unusual when they looked up. The formation found them. Thanks for watching. Now check out the videos popping up on screen for more fascinating stories.